Welcome all to the Samveda e-learning classes which is organized for grade 6. We were discussing about the lesson separation of substances. In the previous class, we discussed about all these learning points, that is introduction, why should we separate the substances, methods of separation, hand picking, threshing, winnowing and at last sieving. In today's session, we will discuss about these points, that is first sedimentation, decantation, filtration, evaporation and condensation, at last solubility of substances in water. In the previous session, we have discussed about many methods, that is hand picking, winnowing, threshing, sieving, but in some instances we can't separate the substances using those methods also. At that time, what should we do? We shall see. Look at this picture once. What do you see? It is nothing but the sample of millets which is taken in a vessel. Before using that, we will wash that with the water. When we pour the water into the vessel, the heavier millets sink into the bottom, and after that we will remove the water. The water consists of the soil particles and it carries all the soil particles along with that, so that we will clean the millets. And also we can see another one instance. Look at the picture. Cleaning the rice before cooking. In our daily life everyone does that. Before cooking the rice, we clean the rice with the water, because it may consist of some of the dust particles which we cannot remove from any of the methods. Already we have studied that. From hand picking or else from sieving we can't do that. At that time we need to wash the rice with the water. It is nothing but the process of settling or being deposited as a sediment after water is added to it. This process is known as sedimentation. Look at the picture. Here the impurities are settled down at the bottom because they are the heavier components, so that they will sink into the bottom and we can remove the water later. Sedimentation is nothing but settling down at the bottom. After that, what should we do? We need to separate that. Look at the picture now. It is the mixture of oil and the water. We can see that oil is floating on the water. We have to keep that undisturbed for some time. At that time, the oil start to float. After that, what should we do? We have to take another one container and we have to pour the oil to another one container. In the same way, when we keep the muddy water for some time, the mud settle down at the bottom, and after that we need to separate the water from that beaker. This process is known as decantation. Decantation is the process of separation of immiscible liquids or of a liquid and a solid. Immiscible liquids are nothing but the liquids which do not mix each other properly. For example, oil and the water, they do not mix with each other. They are known as immiscible liquids. Or else we can use the decantation method also for separate to liquid and a solid. To understand this better, we will watch an video. Collect some muddy water from a pond or a river. If it is not available, mix some soil to this water in this glass. Let it stand for some time. After leaving this for some time, observe the water carefully. The soil particles have been settled down at the bottom. Since the soil particles are heavier, they have settled down at the bottom. This process is known as sedimentation. Now, I will take another one beaker. Slightly tilt the glass without disturbing the water. Let the water from the top flow into the another glass. Now, you can see the soil particles which have settled down at the bottom. It is the decanted water. Though the water is separated from the soil particles, it is not fit for drinking. After watching this video, I hope everyone got the idea of sedimentation and decantation. After decantation also, the water is not fit for drinking. It is not purified clearly. it may consist of some of the impurities in that. At that time what we have to do? Look at this picture. It is nothing but the filtration. For the filtration, the apparatus required is the beaker, dirty water, funnel, and another one beaker to get the clean water, and the tripod stand. First what we need to do is, we need to take the dirty water in a beaker and we have to pour that in the funnel, which consists of filter paper. Filter paper is nothing but the paper which consists of small pores and which does not allow the solid impurities to pass through that, and we have to pour that in the funnel. The filter paper, it resists all the impurities in that, and the clear water we can see that in the beaker. Filtration can be used to separate components of a mixture of an insoluble solid and a liquid. Insoluble solid means the solid which do not dissolve in the water. For example, sand does not dissolve in the water, whereas salt, it dissolves in the water, whereas sugar, even that will also dissolve in the water. Here in the filtration we can separate only the insoluble solid and a liquid. To understand this better, we shall watch a video. After decantation also, the water is not completely pure. For that, we need to filter the decanted water. For filtration, we need to take filtration paper and we have to fold this like a cone and we have to keep this onto the funnel. Now, slowly pour the decanted water onto the funnel. Here we can see the clear water is being collected in the other container. Here the fine soil particles have been collected in the filter paper. Now you can say that the water is purified completely. Now, uses of filtration in daily life. In our daily life, we see many instances where we use the filtration. Look at the first picture, everyone knows about that. It is nothing but noodles. What do we do in that? First, we boil that in the water. After that, we need to separate that from the noodles. For that, we use that vessel which consists of small pores in that, so that we will separate the noodles from the water. Look at the next picture. It is nothing but the juice. In the juice centers, before drinking the juice, what do? We need to separate the seeds and the solid particles of the pulp from the juice. After that only we can drink that. Next comes, it is nothing but the paneer. How do we do the paneer? It is nothing but the milk product. To the boiling milk we need to add the lemon juice, so that we will get the mixture of solid paneer and the liquid. After that we need to separate the solid paneer by filtering that with the cloth. Here instead of filter paper we are using the cloth. Even it will hold the solid particles in that, leaving the liquid behind. Look at the picture. What do you see in that? Here in the first picture you can see the cloths have been spreaded in the sunlight. Why do we do that? Since the cloths are wet, due to the heat of the sun, cloths get dried, it gets evaporated. In the same way, in the second picture, what do you see? In that, you can see a lady who is drying her wet hair. Since the hair dryer gives the hot air, from that the wet hair get dries. Here, due to the heat, the wetness is being dried. It is nothing but the evaporation process. The process of conversion of water into its vapor on heating is known as evaporation. We have seen in the filtration process, we have filtered all the soil particles from the water, but it was separating only the solid particles which was insoluble in water. What about the soluble substances? For example, if we take the salt solution, we can't separate that through the filtration. For that, we need to use evaporation process. In that, first we need to take the salt solution in a container. It is known as evaporating dish, and after that we need to heat that using the spirit lamp. We have to heat that until we get the soil in the container. The water in the container start to evaporate, and at last we will get the salt in the container. What do you see in the picture? It is nothing but obtaining salt from the sea water. The sea water, no, it consists of many salts in that. Among that, the common salt is also one of that. What should we do? First, we have to make the shallow pits like that. After that, we need to allow the sea water to fill in that. When it is exposed to the sunlight for many days, the water slowly gets evaporated, leaving behind the salt in the pits. You can see the crystal salt in the next picture. It is nothing but the salt remained in the shallow pits. After that, we need to purify that before using to cook. What do you see in that? In the first picture, you can see the leaves. Leaves consist of small droplets in that. How does it happen? Think, already you have read this in the previous grade. How does it happen? It is nothing but the small water droplets. In the winter mornings we can see that too in the early mornings we can see that. In the early mornings it will be very cold. We know that air consists of water vapor in it. When it comes into contact with the coldness, slowly it condenses. After cooling down, it converts into water droplets. In the same way, look at the second picture. There is a glass. By seeing that only we can come to know that it is nothing but the cold water. When we keep the cold water outside the refrigerator, what happens at that time? The air which is around the glass, it will be little bit hot compared to the cold water. When it comes contact with the coldness of the water, slowly it condenses, it cools down, forming the water droplets in the surface of the glass. In the same way, you can see the third picture also. It is nothing but the water droplets which is collected on the windows. From all these, what do you understand? After evaporation, even we can get the water back, isn't it? I told that we can separate the salt from the salt solution, but we will get the salt back. What about the water? If we need the water as well as the salt, we need to condense that. Here the concept of condensation comes. First, we need to take the salt solution in the kettle that you can see in the picture, transfer that into the kettle and close the lid properly. You can see the spout of the kettle, and in that the steam will come out. Just above that, take a plate which has the ice cubes on it. When the steam touches the plate, slowly it condenses and it converts into water droplets which is collected in the beaker, so that we can convert the salt solution into salt and water. Here we will get the salt as well as water back. The condensation is nothing but the process of conversion of water vapor into its liquid form on cooling is called condensation. In our daily life, we can see a condensation and evaporation process in most of the instances. For example, look at the picture now. It is nothing but water cycle. What is the main source of water in the earth? It is nothing but rain. We get the water from the rain only. All the rivers, ponds, lakes, it is filled with the water by the rain only. So, only we say that rain is the main source of water. At last, all the water is reached to the oceans. You might have observed that in the summer seasons, you can see the some of the empty ponds and lakes, dried ponds and lakes, isn't it? It is nothing but the water is completely evaporated due to the heat of the sun. Due to the heat of the sun, the water slowly converts into the water vapor and it reaches the atmosphere. When it reaches the atmosphere, when it cools down slowly, it converts again into the water droplets. Here the water vapor is converting into water droplets by cooling. It is nothing but condensation. In the condensation only the clouds are formed. Clouds are nothing but due to the condensation. When the clouds become heavy, it starts to rain. When it rains, again the water reaches the earth. In this way, the balance of water happens in the earth, in the atmosphere. It is nothing but the water cycle. In our daily life, we can see many instances where the condensation process undergo. For example, everyone knows that boiling the milk. When you boil the milk, you can notice the steam coming out from the vessel. What happens after boiling the milk? You switch off the gas stove and keep the plate inverted on the vessel. After some time, you notice the water droplets under the surface of plate. Why it is so? It is nothing but due to the condensation. When the steam of the milk cools down, after some time, the water vapor, that is the steam, converts into small droplets of water and it forms the layer under the surface of the plate. And also in the bathrooms, after taking bath, you can see the small water droplets on the surface of the mirrors. Why it is so? Usually everyone will take bath in the hot water. When the steam of the hot water cools down after some time, it may be after 10 minutes or after 15 minutes, the water vapor again converts into water and it forms the layer on the mirror. So, these all because of the condensation. So far we have learnt many separating methods from the beginning, isn't it? What are they? Hand picking, winnowing, threshing, sieving, and in today's class also we have studied many separating methods. Now, I will give one more instance. We shall see how to separate substances from that mixture. Now, look at this picture. It is nothing but the mixture of sand and some other particles. It may be the iron filings, it may be the small stones and pebbles. Now, the task is how to separate those substances. Remember all the methods that you have studied. First one is hand picking. Can you separate the substances by hand picking? Is it possible? You can separate the small pebbles and stones, but not all the substances. After that, it is threshing. Threshing is not at all possible. That is beating on the harder surface. It is not possible in this instance. After that, winnowing is also not possible. If you blow the air, the sand particles will flies away. So, even that is not possible. After that, sieving is also not possible because almost the sand particles and the iron filings of same size. So, you can't use sieving method also. Next, it comes sedimentation and decantation. For sedimentation and decantation, at least one substance should be of liquid form, but here all the substances are of solid form. So, you can't use sedimentation and decantation also. After that, it is evaporation and condensation. Again here there is no liquid, so you can't use that method also. Now which is the method suitable to separate these substances from the mixture? You can observe that it has small iron filings on that. Iron is a magnetic material, so it is always attracted towards the magnet, whereas the sand is non-magnetic material. When you bring the magnet near to the sand particles, only the iron filings are attracted towards the magnet, so that you can separate the iron filings as well as the sand from the mixture. It is nothing but the magnetic separating method. This process is known as magnetic separating method. So far we have learnt many separating methods. Once we shall revise that. The first one is hand picking method. In the hand picking method, we separate the substances by picking by hand. In that case, the substances must be larger enough so that we can hold that. After that, we learnt about threshing. Threshing is nothing but separating the grains from the stalks. Usually it is done by the farmers after harvesting. After that, it comes winnowing. In the winnowing, we will separate the lighter quantity as well as the harder quantity. So, by blowing air, we will separate different components in that. After that, we learnt about sieving. In sieving, components should be of different sizes. Only then we can separate the substances using a device known as sieve. And in many cases we can see the sieves in our daily life also, we use the sieving method. After that, that is in today's session, we have learnt first about sedimentation and decantation, after that evaporation and condensation, and now we learnt about magnetic separation method. These are the different separating methods. In the filtration, we found that many substances will dissolve in the water, isn't it? Many substances will be dissolved in the water. For example, it may be salt, it may be sugar. Now, we shall know about that. Solubility of substances in water. What is the meaning of solubility? It is nothing but the ability of the substances to dissolve in the water. Whether all the substances will dissolve in the water? No. Now, we shall see that once. Look at the picture. It is nothing but the salt. When we add the salt with the water, what happens? We get the salt solution. Here, the salt is known as solute. Solute is nothing but the substances which dissolves, whereas next the solvent is known as the medium in which the solute dissolves. When we add solute and solvent, we get the solution as a result. Here the salt is the solute and the water is the solvent. At last we get the salt solution. So, it is about the solubility of the substances in water. Now, we have understood the meaning of solubility. Now, the question is whether all the substances will soluble in water. We shall see that. Look at the table. They have given one table. In that, the substances which dissolve in water are known as soluble substances, whereas the substances which do not dissolve in water are known as insoluble in water. Look at the table. Salt, sugar, oxygen gas, vinegar, all these are known as soluble substances. It is not necessary that all the substances should be in the solid form only. It may be in the liquid form or else in the gaseous form. All these are the soluble substances, whereas flour, it may be ragi flour, wheat flour or else rice flour, and oil, sand, stone, all these are known as insoluble substances because they do not dissolve in the water. It is about the soluble and insoluble substances. Now, you know that many substances will dissolve in the water. Whether the water can dissolve any amount of substances in it, we shall see that by observing an video. Can water dissolve any amount of a substance? We shall see that by doing an activity. For that, I have taken some amount of salt and some amount of water in this beaker. First, I will add 1 teaspoon of salt into the water. Now stir this well until the salt dissolves in the water. Now the salt has dissolved in the water. Take 1 more teaspoon of salt and mix it in the water. Now I will take 1 more teaspoon of salt and I will again add this into the water. Look at the beaker. At the bottom of the beaker, you can see some of the salt. It is settled down there because now the water cannot dissolve any more salt into that. In the sense, now the water has become saturated. After observing a video, I think you have understood that what is the meaning of saturated solution. In the video, when first I added 1 spoon of salt into the beaker, what happens? The salt has been dissolved in the water. At that time, the water is not saturated solution. In the sense, it is unsaturated solution. However, more of the substance can be dissolved in a solution on heating. You know that many substances will dissolve in the water. Now, we shall do an activity. Take 2 beakers of water. In one beaker, what you have to do? You have to add the salt, and in another one beaker, you have to add sugar into that. So, add same quantity of substances in both the beakers. Sugar can dissolve in the water slowly, whereas salt can dissolve in the water very soon. What does it mean? Different substances will dissolve in the water in different amount. It is about the solutions. So far in this class, we have learnt many separating methods and about the solubility of the substances. Now we shall revise once. In the first, we have learnt the sedimentation and decantation. What is the meaning of sedimentation and decantation? Settling down of the heavier components at the bottom is known as sedimentation, and after that we pour that into the another one beaker is known as decantation. Usually we do that in our daily life. After that we have learnt about condensation and evaporation. Usually first the evaporation happens, after that we will do the condensation. We have learnt about filtration. In this filtration, we can separate the insoluble solids from the liquids. At last, we have learnt about solubility of the substances in water, and we have taken the example of salt solution and the sugar solution. At last, the home assignment. You might have observed the preparation of ghee from the butter. Which method can be used to separate ghee from the residue? Think over all the methods and which method is suitable for this, write the answer. Second one, filtration is helpful in separating an insoluble dash from a dash. You know the meaning of insoluble, it is